Hi there Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk Bounty video, and welcome to episode 119 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly series where you ask me questions, and every week I do my very best to answer them for you. So if you do have a question for next week's episode, please leave it in the comment section below and we can keep this series going. I just want to address a couple of things before we do get onto this week's questions. And the first thing was that last night, I hope none of you missed it, but last night I hosted a live stream on my channel, and I had John from the SWTVC group on Instagram, I had Only One Kenobi, and I had Christian from the Smuggler's Canyon on, and we were attempting to agree on the figures for the March Madness bracket. If you don't know what the March Madness bracket is, head over to SWTVC on Instagram, and all this month they're going to be doing an amazing voting thing where you get to vote for your most wanted vintage collection figures in this like tournament style bracket, and by the end of the month we'll see who wins. We went through the bracket last night. If you missed that video, I highly recommend watching that live stream on replay. It was a great laugh. I had a really good time. I think everybody else did as well, and I'm pretty sure the people that were watching enjoyed it as well. The chat was really lively, and yeah, we just had an awesome time. Really good. The second thing I want to address is that it's going to be a busy time on the channel this week. I'm hoping to receive a little package on Tuesday which should contain some of the new figures, so check out those reviews that are going to be coming soon. And if you do happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a like down below, hit that thumbs up because it really does help the video and the channel. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Andrew Aldu Lee says, hi BB, I had a question regarding TVC Clone Wars Walmart exclusive ARC Trooper Captain red and blue versions. Do you think Hasbro will do something similar to the Bad Batch 4 back and release more towards the release date, supposedly? Or has that ship sailed and we'll have to shell out hundreds to army build them? Thanks, as always. Love the media platform you bring for the Star Wars figure community. Thank you so much, Andrew. So I'm not too sure how this is going to work with those Clone Wars figures. Loads of pre-orders have been turning up in the States, I do believe, and a lot of them have been damaged, which is pretty awful. You know, that always seems to be the way with Walmart. They just don't seem to be able to package figures, whether they're in bubble mailers or if they're in a box that's too small for the figures. They have to realise that these are collector items and they should be posted in such a way that they reach you in good condition. I have, however, seen on Instagram, I think Yakface posted that some are being found in stores, so check your local stores. If all else fails, I wouldn't pay scalper prices on eBay. What I would do is I would order them from Star Action Figures in the UK. I will put a link in the description below, because at the end of the day, they do post internationally. Now, it may cost you a bit to get them sent over to you, but you could order a case of 8 red ARC Troopers and you could get them in minty fresh condition, because that's how they come to us in these cases. They don't get opened and put on the pegs or shoved in rubbish boxes. Star Action Figures will send them perfectly for you. As I say, it's just going to cost you a little bit more because of the postage to the States or wherever you live, but they do post internationally. So if all else fails, there's always that way. Robert Westwood says, thank you as always for the work you put into your channel, keeping us, the fans, updated. Question for next week. What do you think is the reason for Hasbro's aversion to giving us Vac Metallized Droids lately? We should have a Vac Metallized C-3PO or Death Star droid at the least. I heartedly agree with you, Robert. We really should. And just look how good this C-3PO looks here. This is the one that came with the Ewok chair. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is true Vac Metallization. I'm not too sure if it's the same process that they used on the vintage figures. I do think they're a little bit worried about using Vac Metal. I think there's been some reports of the pram that came with the Grogu in the Razor Crest with peeling paint issues and stuff like that. And the plastic they use for figures that are Vac Metallized is slightly different. It's like that white clear plastic. I think it's quite brittle, and yeah, I can imagine that when you do paint over it that it will rub off or flake off quite easily. So maybe that's the reason, I don't know. Some other people talked about environmental issues and things like that. Ultimately, I've got to say, my friend, I don't actually know why. They have never come out and said the reason why. But they did Vac Metallize that pram, so it can be done. And yeah, we need a C-3PO looking like that. Brand new sculpt, don't we? Drake Aracoruscent says, hi BB, great video as always. Question for next week. What do you think the longevity of TVC will be? It's been releasing figures for 7 years in total at the moment. Will Hasbro look to make a new line of figures alongside TVC? Me personally, I love TVC and wouldn't want it to go anywhere. And I 100% agree with that. I mean, I absolutely love this line of figures. And I think Hasbro know who the audience is, right? It's an adult collecting line. There's no two ways about it. I think if you took the vintage card back away from it and packed it in some other way, then you're going to lose a lot of your customers, unfortunately, from the 3.75 inch line. I think that's just a reality. And that's why, you know, if Hasbro, you are listening to this video and you're even thinking about getting rid of the bubble and the card back style, then I know you want to do the whole plastic thing, but for me, getting rid of that classic look, this is the product. 50% of this is the product, the card back and the bubble. Yes, we love the figures. There's a lot of people that like the figures loose and don't care for the packaging, but I think there's a lot more people like me that would buy two, one to keep carded and one to keep loose. And I think we don't want to deviate away from that at all. So how long do I think it'll go for? I think we've got a few years left in it yet, and let's hope we get some more good stuff. Steve Luther says, "Hi Bossk, love the channel. I have a few questions for you if you could answer them for me, please. Which do you consider to be the definitive 3.75 inch Darth Vader figure?" So I'll answer that one very quickly before we go on to the next point. So this is the Black Series 3.75 inch Darth Vader. It was released twice, first in the orange line, and I do believe the head kept on falling off, and then they fixed that issue a bit and released him then in the sort of TIE Fighter Black Series line. And for me, this is my favourite Darth Vader. I think it looks most accurate. It is based on the one from Revenge of the Sith, so it's not OT accurate, but I think that helmet for me is the best Vader, and it's got all the articulation you need. It's a really, really good Vader. Second question, do you think we'll see a Baz Malbus in TVC? And I think we will. We obviously got Chirrut Imwe. Baz Malbus did quite well in the SWTVC bracket, so again, check them out for that. He's quite high up on that bracket. And also, I think there's some Hasbro employees that rate Baz Malbus quite highly. I think on some of the live streams he gets mentioned, so let's keep our fingers crossed for him. When it comes to your last question about the Bad Batch, it's very similar to another question that I'm going to read out now. And James Perez says, "Hey Tim, very big fan of yours. Hope your Bossk family is doing well." Thank you, James. Was wondering if you could see the Bad Batch in the vintage collection since they've put them out in the Black Series, and do you think we'd get them this year? I can see them doing the Bad Batch for the vintage collection. I don't think it's going to be this year. From what I can see, what we're getting this year, I don't think there's any room for the Bad Batch figures. Now, they might surprise us and do a surprise wave and you get them all, but I very much doubt that. I'm pretty sure if you look at all of the Bad Batch figures, each one is going to need quite a lot of new tooling, and new tooling costs money out of the budget. And I think, you know, from the vintage collection point of view, there's maybe more important figures for them to do. They can only do so many new ones a year, which is pretty unfortunate, but that is just the way it is. But the Bad Batch concerns me ever so slightly, because obviously there is, 5 of them or whatever, and how long would it take for them to give us all of those? I mean, they could do maybe one a year, and it's going to take, 5 years to get all of those? As I say, it's a difficult one for them to tackle, because essentially they don't just want to give you one of them. They've made that mistake before with the Knights of Ren and things like that. What use is one Knight of Ren? It's just useless, isn't it? So I don't know how we're going to get those. It's a difficult one for them to do, but, you know, it doesn't mean that I don't want them. I absolutely do. Patreon supporter Josh Butt says, "Hey Tim, question for next week. What would your list of 10 to 12 be for the Return of the Jedi 40th Anniversary Black Series figures on vintage card backs? We waited so long for an Emperor in TVC. I sure hope they don't skip over him." I really don't think they will. What you got to remember is about the 40th Anniversary Black Series, that they all tend to be repacks, don't they? So it's figures they've done before, just put on a vintage card. So I've put these two here. Didn't they do a new Wedge fairly recently? I could see them wanting to get more money out of that one and stick him on a vintage card. There's a fairly new Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight. I could see them doing that. Other than that, I think you could look at maybe the Biker Scout, possibly the TIE Fighter pilot, maybe one of the Ewoks that they've already brought out. Admiral Akbar would be a dead cert. You know, if they're going to do 2 waves of them, you can see where I'm going there. Basically, they'll all be repacks, and the sales pitch on those is that you're getting them on vintage cards, essentially. Gigamac says, question for next week. Do you think there's any room for more comic-inspired figures in the line? I recently got into the Bounty Hunter series, and Valance is becoming a favourite. I'd like to see him in vintage scale. Yeah, so I think there's room for comic book characters to be included. I think what would make them more of a possibility is if they're then put into sort of live action. And I'm going to show you this one, which is one of my favourites. This is the comic pack for Cammy and Fixer. Now, this was awesome when it came out, but it's even more relevant now because these two were in the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know whether they actually named them as being such, but when Boba Fett goes into the Toshki station, these two are being picked on by the Nikto gang, and These are great looking figures. I'm going to actually open this at some point, make a video about it. Now I've got myself another one of these. I do have one which I'm going to keep boxed, but I definitely want these two figures loose. They look great. So yeah, I think when it comes to comic books, as I said, you know, if the characters are then put into live action in some way, then there's going to be more chance of that. Whether we'll actually see these types of comic packs again, I'm not so sure. Cisco Deer says, love the content. Tim, question for next week. How come the figures that get remade over the time seem to have a horrible plastic quality to them? I've got to be honest with you, my friend, I haven't really noticed that apart from with the battle droids. The battle droids, the reissue of that was super bendy, super flexy. And the other thing that I've noticed is that the blasters and things like that are much more bendy, which is a bit of a shame. They're not as good quality. But in terms of the actual figures, I'm not so sure. I mean, take Luke Skywalker, he's a new figure. I wouldn't say the sort of quality of the actual plastic of the actual figure is any different to what we've had before. I'm not really too sure about that. Ashcash says, keep up the great content. Question for next week. Do you think Hasbro forgot about some really important villains in the vintage collection like Revan, Thrawn, as you've mentioned, Imperial officers, some Inquisitors and much more? Is there any particular reason for them to miss out so many villains? I've got to admit, I've got no idea why we are missing so many villains. I did a whole video about the missing villains from the vintage collection and the list is extensive, believe me. And when you're talking about people like Director Krennic, for example, we were only talking about this on the live stream last night. We've got Jyn Erso, we've got Cassian Andor, we've got K2SO. I mean, we've got Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso in the first couple of waves of the vintage collection, but they've got no enemy. Where is Director Krennic? I find it absolutely baffling, and there's some bigger ones than him as well. So I'm not too sure, and I'm hoping it's going to be something they're going to rectify in the future. Callum Cattell says, when will you be doing your next room tour? Keep up the great work. I don't really know, Callum. I'm sorry. I've got to admit, my room is in a bit of a state at the moment. I've got so much stuff that I need to either put away. I've completely run out of room. I'm trying to sort out another room, and I don't know. Maybe I can get something done in the near future, but it may have to wait until I actually get into my new room. Donald Allen says, hi Tim, question for next week. The vintage collection seems to be doing really well. Do you think we could see larger case assortments for each wave instead of a case of 8 with 4 different figures? We could have a case of 16 with 8 different figures, for example. It would be a great way to get caught up on figures we are missing, like the Frog Lady. So I think it's to do with how retail order them and things like that. And I think, going by what I've heard a few other people say, is that a case of 8 is ideal for a peg. So I think maybe 8 figures can fit on a peg, perhaps, something like that. It would be really good if we could have more figures in a wave to start with. I think them going to 6 figures or 6 different figures out of the 8 and then 2 of them get repeated is a good move. I think we've had that a couple of times recently, and I'd love to see more of that going forward. I think a lot of the waves this year have got at least 5 different characters, maybe 6. So that's definitely an improvement on, here's 4, and yeah, each case has double the amount. It's, we want more new figures essentially. I don't really mind how they get broken down in the cases as such, because in the UK we get solid cases of figures, but in terms of new figures, we just want more. MH says, hey Tim, question for next week. What are the chances that Hasbro will give us a newly tooled speeder bike, as they were featured heavily in both Mando and Book of Boba Fett? So I'm not 100% sure which speeder bike you're talking about, because in the Book of Boba Fett, was this one in the Book of Boba Fett? I know the sort of remnant scout troopers drove white ones of these in The Mandalorian. In terms of whether they'll do a newly tooled one, I'm not so sure. I actually don't think there's too much wrong with this one. I think this is a great speeder bike. It would be very cool if it had like the exploding feature like the original vintage one. But I think, when we get to 2023 and it's the Return of the Jedi's anniversary, I would hope that would be the year that we get a speeder bike, because if we don't get it that year, we probably won't ever get it, right? So let's hope we do get, especially this one, in the vintage collection, in that vintage style box. I've got the original Kenner one, so come on, give us one of these. That'd be absolutely fantastic. But as I said, will it just be this one repacked? This is the 2012 Toys R Us exclusive one. I don't really think there's too much wrong with this one. You may disagree. I think it looks pretty cool, and they may just opt to, repacking that one. Secondhand Star Wars says, hey Tim, question for next week. Do you think there's a reason Hasbro wouldn't take the VC60 Clone Trooper approach to all reissues, meaning specifically a change to the card back of any combination of the figure's image, the movie, series and or the VC number. Seems like a really simple and cost-effective solution for Hasbro to meet the needs and wants of our diverse and growing TVC community by simultaneously 1, getting the older figures into the hands of the new collectors, 2, generating additional sales from those that already have a figure but may want the new card back, and 3, maintaining the collectability of the original releases. Thoughts? Yeah, so I've got to admit, when they announced VC60 was changing, that did surprise me, because as we've seen, all the other reissues, whether it's been in the sort of specialty wave or if it's been like the Gamorrean Guard where they've slotted him into another wave, it's always been the same card back. And I personally would like new card backs. I think it's a good thing that they've done, but at the same time I do realise that there's collectors that missed out on TVC 1.0, and there's some really highly sought after card backs from that collection that people want. So there's lots of factors that come into it. So I was surprised that they did that with VC60. So I think, yeah, it does depend on how much the figure's changing. In this case, I think it's getting an all new head and what have you. I'm not too sure. Maybe they thought VC60 wasn't a great image. I think I've always said that they could have found a better image for the 501st Clone Trooper on that card back anyway, so maybe they just want to freshen it up a little bit. I don't know, but essentially I don't think they're going to be losing out any money even if they did put him on that original card back, because it's an army building figure, that one, so I think people would rebuy that one anyway. Plus you've got people that collect card backs from a variant point of view. They're going to want the new release and keep the old release, so it's a difficult one. But this occasion I do like the new card back, and hopefully you'll see it reviewed sometime next week. Rob Ernest says, great video as always. Bossk, question for next week. With the video game Knights of the Old Republic being remastered and possibly released next year for the 20th anniversary of the original game, what are the chances of Revan and Darth Malak finally appearing in TVC in 2023? Also, do you think we would get a repack of Bastila Shan, or should she be a brand new sculpt as well? Keep up the awesome content. Yeah, so I think Darth Revan in particular is high on the list anyway. I think that's quite commonly known in the Hasbro circles that the community want that figure. They've done him a few times in the Black Series already, so I think the fact that that game is coming out enhances the probability that we could get that figure. In terms of Bastila Shan, I think they've already reissued that one once before in the 3.75 inch Black Series, and I think if they're going to reissue her again on that card back from TVC 1.0, I think the only thing that maybe will change with the figure is possibly a new head, but I think it'll just be photo real if they do anything. Alright then guys, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you happen to enjoy the video, please drop a like down below. As I mentioned before, please check out the live stream from last night. We had an absolute great time, such a good laugh, and it's really worth watching. I think so anyway. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters and channel members. Also, thank you to everybody that dropped a super chat last night. Really, really appreciate your support for the channel. Thank you all for watching, and we shall see you on the next one.